Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going to be going over Amarathy's Lightning Blast Static Orb Mana Stacking Sorcerer. So the idea of this build is we're utilizing mana stacking with the Static Orb tree. So Static Orb gets a mana cost based on your max mana, and it will do more damage based on your max mana as well. Then we're also grabbing the nodes after those nodes, the charge ground nodes, which applies all of our single target damage as the charge ground scales with your mana and your crit multi. So the reason why we're doing it like this is because we're stacking max mana to abuse the fractured crown. So we're taking about 65% damage from anything to mana, meaning we are a lot tankier than other sorcerer builds that just, stack HP, as all of our damage is mitigated by our mana pool. And our HP pool might seem low, but our EHP is really high. The reason that is because we're stacking endurance threshold instead of going for HP stacking. The reason why that is because the endurance threshold blessing, like the endurance threshold, the 60% less damage taken, that will apply to the mana as well, because if we take 60% less damage overall, it'll be 60% less damage that goes to our mana, meaning our mana, has more mileage, right? So technically this build actually isn't doing that much damage in comparison to some other builds, but that's not really what it's about. This build is about stacking as much DR and damage reduction as possible through the mom and through the mana stacking and all that, so that you're actually a tanky sorcerer build. In the footage, you'll probably see that he takes multiple Orbis shotguns. Like, he can literally stand in the middle of mobs and do fine. Another quirk about this build is the fact that since Static Orb is damage is based off your max mana, but not your current mana, what that means is you actually don't have to be at max mana all the time to do your damage. And why that's important is because you do not have enough sustain to actually keep at your 489 mana, or in this case later on 700 mana. And why this is important is because he's utilizing the combo of negative focus mana. So focus, there's a node inside focus that gives you about 40% of your max mana instantly after you use focus, which gives you a lot of your mana back and allows you to actually keep casting. Also, Lightning Blast after 2 casts, I think it's 2 or 3 casts, it will refund Static Orb's mana cost as well, so he's utilizing that plus focus to sustain his mana, and as you can tell in the footage, he does completely fine with his mana. Now, I will say this build is rather expensive. This build does take a little bit of gearing to do so, because you want to have your endurance threshold as high as possible, and to do that you might need multiple pieces of exalted endurance threshold gear. Now, you don't technically need this, you'll do completely fine without it, but to min-max the build, you'll definitely want to eventually focus on getting endurance threshold gear and, the endurance threshold blessing and all of that stuff. And with that being said, let's get into the gearing, shall we? Alright, here we are in game, well, in planner with the build here. So, as you can tell, this looks very expensive, but this is actually just what you should be looking for in the footage. He has much worse gear than this. He doesn't have this much exalted gear. This is just what you should be looking for exalted. If you do not know, Amarathy is actually one of the best players right now, as he was actually the person who got Shadow Daggers nerfed, as he was the person who kept getting rank 1 on the arena with Shadow Daggers. He is a very endgame focused character, endgame focused person, so this is a very endgame focused build, hence why everything looks like it does. So this is what he's looking for mainly for endurance gear. Like, he wants endurance threshold mainly. That's like exactly what you want, because you want your endurance threshold here to match what your HP is. Because if you do that, that makes your mana go a lot longer in terms of being a defensive source, because if you just have a basic amount of HP, what'll happen is you'll take much more damage in HP and it'll suck up your mana. So you want to stack endurance instead of HP for this build. So we're going to get into the skills here. So for Static Orb, we take 1 point travel into Shocking Conduit, 5 points into Mana Charge. So it'll give you 5% more damage per 20 max mana, so you want to stack as much mana as possible. In this current planner here, he has about 765. We're just going to do 700 just for the math here. So that's about 200% more mana from like 700 mana. That's a lot of more damage. 1 point into static ground, it will make it so that it will leave a static ground on static orb's explosion, which will do a damage over time. And the reason why he's focusing on this is because he's utilizing electrocuting cascade, where he gets percent more damage per crit multi. He gets about 10% more damage per 12% crit multi, which is a lot. Then, of course, 1 point travel into a Forking Surge, 1 point into Static Armor. So when he casts Static Orb, he gets Lightning Aegis, which he actually has a bunch of idols for damage with Lightning Aegis. So that's just extra damage. 1 point travel into Open Circuit, 1 point into Overcharge Detonation. The main reason why he is running this is because he wants the Static Orb to explode on the first contact, because he wants the charged ground to go off. So if it just pierces enemies, it doesn't really help him. He also gets more damage per mana cost. So for instance, if his Static Orb is like 100 mana, he'll get like 300 more damage from this, and this will apply to the charged ground as well. Of course, 2 points travel into Fusion Blast, and then 3 points into Atomic Manipulation. So this is actually partly how he's sustaining mana. So once he casts Static Orb, if he casts Lightning Blast 3 times, it will actually give him back 75% of what Static Orb costs, which is very strong. This is your stereotypical Flame Ward tree. Nothing too crazy. I'm surprised he's not going for the extra Aegis and all that, but I guess he's just going for the more damage here. Then for focus, this is a little bit more important. So he grabs 4 points into Revelation for more mana from the burst, 1 point into Energy Infusion for the haste on focus use, 4 points into Mana Flooded for the regen, because you want as much regen as possible, 1 point into Desperate Mediation. He's always going to be missing mana, so this is just a bunch of mana regen. 1 point into Null Profusion. This is what I was talking about in the intro. This is how he sustains his mana. This plus Null Infusion will give him about 40% of his max mana gained while negative. So he could be -1 max mana and proc focus, and he'd be at 39% mana. So this is how he sustains his mana. The main reason, like how the build works, because otherwise he would not be able to sustain the mana, and this build would not work. Focus is probably going to be a staple for all of these big static or mana cost builds. Then 4 points travel into Iron Stance. Oh, just 4 points into Iron Stance for more armor. Doesn't really matter what you do with the rest of the focus tree. Teleport, this is like your stereotypical teleport setup. He's just using it to cap his reses, and he's just using it for extra damage. There's like nothing really important here, just for the fact that he's using it to cap his reses. And of course, Lightning Blast. Lightning Blast can actually do halfway decent in terms of clear, since he has so much damage stacked up, so you can actually use it in combination with the Charged Ground from Static Orb. But also as well, one of the most important things is, since he's using a Sorcery Staff, he isn't getting the -3 mana cost with Lightning Blast. Now, if you're at negative mana with Static Orb, if you shoot Static Orb and you're at negative mana, you can't cast Lightning Blast, right? Well, that's what he's doing here. He's running Innate Conduit. It makes it so that when you are out of mana, you can cast Lightning Blast still. Now, this Lightning Blast that you cast when you're out of mana cannot chain, but it's how he gains his mana back up if he goes into negative mana with Static Orb. So this is very important. Everything else is your stereotypical chain, Lightning Blast tree. It's like not really much has changed here. Now, for the passives here, he takes 8 points into Arcanist for the resistances, 2 points travel into Scholar, 5 points into Mage Flurry for the cast speed, because you want some cast speed to make your Lightning Blast cast faster. Then 10 points into Knowledge of Destruction for the crit multi mainly. Then in Sorcery, takes 8 points into Calculated Destruction for the critical strike chance. 8 points into Mana Shell for the mana, because you want as much max mana as possible. 10 points into Wisdom for the mana. 5 points for the cast speed. Sorry about that, guys. Ooh, I'm still sick if you couldn't tell. 1 point travel into Surrounding 5 points into Rift Bolt for the lightning damage leeches life and the lightning pen. 3 points into Whirling Snow for the chill chance because you do want to chill enemies. 5 points into Afterglow. This is actually a really high mana cost skill, so you want to you'll have way more than 40 mana costs. 8 points into Crackling Precision for the crit chance. This is doubled for lightning skills because you do want your stuff to crit. It's just you don't build any base crit inside shock into Static Orb. So sometimes the initial explosion crits and does a bunch of damage, but like I said, we're mainly building around the charged ground. 5 points into Arcane Obliteration for crit multi. This will apply to the Static Orbs crit multi to damage over time thing. 5 points into Distant Spark for extra clear. 5 points into Arcane Eternal Ascendancies, probably using this to cap his reses. 5 points into Arcane Current for the shock effect. The stun duration is kind of cool too, because you're going to be stunning a lot. 5 points into Archmage. This is 15 extra flat, because he has plenty more than 200 mana. 1 point into Arcane Insight, just for the extra 20% increased damage. 5 points into Spellslinger for the adaptive spell damage, and the mana regen helps. Then 4 points into Recollection. The main reason he's running Recollection is so that his focus cooldown is a little bit less long, because you want focus to be as low as a cooldown as possible so you can spam all your other abilities, so you definitely want the cooldown. Now for the rest of the gear here, the most important part of this build is the Fractured Crown. If you don't know how to get a Fractured Crown, what you need to do is you need to get a Gilded Crown, gamble a Gilded Crown, and then once you get a Destructive Fracture, this is the one that will destroy the item, right? It will create the Fractured Crown instead of destroying the item, so that's how you get that. There are probably videos on YouTube on how to actually attain this item. I'll probably make one eventually. Orion's Eye, this isn't necessary, quote unquote. It's just a lot of flat mana. You can get away with not running an Orion's Eye and still have a decent 500 mana, right? So you don't technically need an Orion's Eye. This is just like, eventually when you do drop an Orion's Eye, obviously you'd probably want to run it on this build, right? Then of course for the chest, the lightning crit multi and the damage taken before health. He's actually running poison res here and armor. So the reason why he's not running HP on his gear is because he wants his HP to be as low as possible. He does not want any extra HP anywhere. He doesn't want to touch HP at all. So instead of running HP, he's just like running resistances here instead, because there's nothing really else to run here except for like dodge. But due to the removal of dodge potion, you actually can't really get enough dodge for it to matter. So he just puts random stats here. So the main thing you want is just the prefixes here, and mana, obviously. The ring, you want Endurance Threshold, just some damage, the crit avoidance, mainly the Endurance Threshold. The Endurance Threshold is very important for this build. Same thing with the other ring. I actually don't, this is probably, this must be his in-game ring. Yeah, this might actually be his in-game ring. Yeah, I don't know why it's that. You probably want the damage, obviously, the damage like the other ring is. I'll fix that before we post the thing. You want the Cleanse Pot, obviously. He's putting resistance here because he doesn't want HP. He just wants endurance. Endurance here as well. Cast speed, mana, of course for the boots. The movement speed, the intelligence, because it gives us a little bit of damage. And of course armor, because you do not want any HP anywhere, and you can't put endurance threshold here. Then here as well, the cast speed, the crit multi. Obviously, you could probably get away with just running regular crit multi. This is like his gear in game, so it doesn't really matter. Now for blessings, you definitely want the endurance from Spirits of Fire, the endurance threshold from Herot. That's very important because that helps you reach to your actual HP pool. The crit avoidance, so you're capped on crit avoidance. The mana, it's very strong. The spell damage leeches health. This is very strong because this applies to the static orb damage, the damage over time. So it's actually a lot of leech from this, right? And it helps him sustain. Since his HP pool is so low, but his DR is so high, like his effective HP pool, this is actually really strong, as all your leech is even stronger than before, because you're not taking that much damage. And that's pretty much it for the build overall. I think there could be some things that could be improved here, but I'll have to play the build myself, obviously, before I can, give some criticism. Myself, I think I would focus more onto the elemental damage over time aspect and just use lightning blast for, obviously, because you can get a lot of elemental damage over time on gear, and that would make your charge ground to a lot more damage. But I think it's just because this is just what gear he had laying around. With that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.